Okay, class, let's go to group 3. So we have Kalen, Joseph, George, and Ingrid. So let's start with Kalen's work. Alright, so I think this is a much better set for you from last week's, Kalen. I think getting into a little bit more connotation for this version right here and starting to see a bit more about what this particular kind of cake looks like gives more of an accurate description for your viewer. Now, one thing I will say is we do want to try to avoid upside down text if we can, right? And we also want to make sure that when we make certain things like this on the page, other elements on the page need to kind of correspond nicely to more dominant elements like this. So if we're starting to do things that put text on a path like that, a curved path, then maybe there's something about this text that also curves like that, you know? Right now, I'm not really sure why we have the text on a diagonal going in this direction, and then we have the text curving out that direction, and then we have a spiral over here. So lots happening, okay? So I would prefer you simplify your layout to one type of effect. And when I say effect, I mean this is an effect, putting text on a spiral fashion. And then putting text in a diagonal, that's another effect, all right? And then curving text, that's another effect. So I would say simplify to just one effect, right? And if this is roll cake, let's see what the text would look like maybe if it were curved. You know, if your whole layout was curved like that, how would that look? And I think it would make a little bit more sense, okay? So try that out and see if you can work that for your final layout. And definitely want to make sure that you create a bit more space for the edges. This is too close. You need some breathing room around your layout. Okay, kind of like what you have here, some nice breathing room. And it's okay if you need to make the text a little bit smaller, you can do that. But try that out. See if you can curve the text similar to this path that you have here going on. You know, what would it look like if all the text was curving on that same angle? Okay. Let's take a look at your denotative. I would say the same. You're still there's a lot of text right here, and this text is very close to the edge. So is this area right here. So we need to make things a little bit smaller. And I would suggest you start with, you know, making things that work well with columns. All right. You know, maybe parts of your text. Maybe your ingredients list is here, and then your instructions go into one column here and then flow into the second column, and you can definitely get away with making your text smaller in order to fit that information on these types of columns with. So, and I think your whole quote can get smaller too. I feel like you're trying to fill in all the edges of the page when you don't have to. So think about using a little bit more white space, okay? So that would be my feedback for you. I think you're definitely getting better, for sure, in this type of assignment. So there's definitely some improvement. If I want to go back and take a look and see in your previous layouts, I will say you're starting to do that here, where you're aligning things according to columns. So try to see if you can bring that in for this version right here for your denotative. Okay. Moving on. So Joseph, I think this is a much better version for you, just using color to kind of balance out the different types of versions for you, so the connotative and denotative. But let's just make sure that when we take a look at our denotative, we have a little bit more alignment going on. Right now, it seems like this is kind of going off slanted. It's not really lining up to the same kind of axes as these areas right here. So I'm going to look at that a little bit more closely. Same with this area right here. And I definitely read Become Your Own Barista first before Nitro Brew. So I would just suggest you maybe bring Nitro and Cold Brew maybe closer to the title. That way we can associate the title and subtitle, which would be your pull quote, to read a little bit better, and see what that would do for you. And then if we go into your denotative version, you're using a little bit too much text on all corners of the page, and I'm wondering if there's a way to simplify how we read this. And I think there's just too much scale going on. So I know you have a small ingredients list and a small instructions list, but let's try to see if we can maybe make one of them a bit smaller, because right now how you're treating your ingredients list is how you're treating your instructions list. So maybe this one is a lighter version, or it's smaller. So again, also with reading the title, it's supposed to be nitro cold brew, so see if there's a way we can unify the title together. It seems like in both versions we're dividing it up on the page, right? But yeah, I would just say, try to unite those concepts together and just kind of treat your ingredients list different than your instructions list. Okay? Let's move on to George Padilla. So I don't think I got a new version from you this week, so I'll just say refer back to last week's version and go from there for the feedback that you've received. Okay? So Ingrid, this is going to be this week. I think this looks nice, bringing in some color. That definitely worked out nicely. I didn't mind the black and white either. I think this worked out either way, but if you want to include color, that's fine too. One thing that I would just say is just make sure the text right here is a little bit darker, maybe the same color as you have here, like this ochre color. That way it's a little easier to read. Right now it's way too light, right? I think this looks nice that you kind of paired your Latin American dessert with tres leches. That feels a little bit more cohesive as a title. I'm kind of comparing the two together and seeing what works. I definitely like how you put your text block here better than what you had here. It's a little too spaced out, and it just feels a little bit more tighter and just feels like actual text you would read in a cookbook. And I would definitely ask that you go back to this version right here for your text block as opposed to this one over here. I like that you're doing the gradation in the numbers. I think you can still do that with your numbers right here, right? So see if there's something we can bring in. And I also think your ingredients list here works better than it does here. I think everything just got a little bit bigger. And what I liked about this version was the space, the negative space that you had, and the interplay between the large 3 cutting out and the smaller text. So you have 3 elements working well for you. You have the large size 3, you have the title, and then your copy right here. But I would definitely recommend you go back to this version right here in terms of size, because I think the size relation worked out nicely. It was a nicer contrast. But I think that would be my only feedback for your denotative. For your connotative, I think this reads a lot better than your previous version right here. So I think this looks much better. One thing that I would just say is just careful with the upside down text. I know we're repeating the title here. Just be a little bit more cautious of that, so that way we can read it all around. And so just take this half and flip the text so that we can read it the correct way. Alright, so I'm trying to see for your ingredients list. Looks like it's in this area right here. I like that you've contained everything inside the number 3, but I'm just wondering if there's a way to maybe put a label that says ingredients somewhere, or instructions somewhere here. The only thing I would also advise you is to just give a bit more space in between, because the text is right on the number 3 is right on your instructions, and it's getting a little too crowded. So I'm wondering if we can just maybe do a bit of white space. Like, think of the 3 having a white outline, a thick white outline around it. What would that look like? I think it might read a little bit better as opposed to reading so tightly in between right here. So I think it'll actually let the space breathe a little bit more. But otherwise, I think these two work well as a set. They have this huge contrast between them that I think they look nice as a set. Kind of like one looks like it's from a cookbook page, and another one looks like from an editorial page in a magazine of Bon Appetit, where you're looking at an actual plate with dessert. So I think this worked out really nicely. Just a few tweaks here and there. Definitely refer back to your old version for text, and then see where that takes you. Okay. I think this is it for group 3. I will see you in the next video for group 4.